Number 8. Tyler Hadley. One day in 2011, a 17-year-old loner named Tyler Hadley invited kids from his high school to a party at his house in Port St. Lucie, Florida. Those who knew him well were surprised because he had recently complained that his parents were getting increasingly strict with him. Hadley reassured the people he invited over that his parents weren't home. When someone asked what he'd do if they came home during the party, he eerily replied, "They won't, trust me." Soon enough, 60 guests were there, drinking and trashing the house, while Tyler tripped on ecstasy. During the bash, people continued to ask the young man where his parents were. He gave several different stories, and partygoers began joking that Tyler had killed his folks. Weeks earlier, he had told a friend that he wanted to do just that, and have a party after. But the friend wrote it off as the mindless banter of an annoyed teen who was known for acting strange. Throughout the night, Tyler mentioned to a few people that he had done something bad and that he would soon be going away for a long time. He told a close friend that he had murdered his parents, at which point the friend realized that their vehicles were still in the driveway. Tyler took him into the master bedroom, which had remained locked all night, and revealed the gruesome scene. There was blood everywhere, and his parents' corpses were still in the room, buried under a pile of rubble. The teen told his friend that he hid their cell phones so they couldn't call for help, and beat them both to death with a claw hammer. After leaving the party, the friend contacted law enforcement. He told them everything, and later that night, police arrived at his home to investigate the accusations. In the months leading up to their murder, Tyler's partying and bad behavior had gotten out of hand. It finally got to the point where his parents ended up putting him on house arrest. His mother even had him committed under Florida's Baker Act, which allows parents to mandate their children to involuntary psychiatric care. Tyler Hadley was tried as an adult due to the horrifying nature of his crimes. He was convicted of murder and will spend the rest of his life behind bars. Number 7. Kiely Rodni. Kiely Rodni had a bright future to look forward to when she graduated high school earlier this year at just 16 years old. However, recently something went horribly wrong after she attended a party in the Northern California wilderness and was never seen again. Hundreds of people were at the gathering, yet police had trouble getting many of the teens to talk, possibly because they didn't want to incriminate themselves for underage drinking. Their reluctance complicated the investigation, but from what detectives could gather, the last time anyone saw Kiely was when she got into her SUV and left the party. Her loved ones were unable to reach her on her cell phone, leading to fears that she had been kidnapped or worse. A large search ensued, but after 10 days of finding no signs of Kiely or her vehicle, law enforcement announced that they planned to scale back on their efforts. Community members and the young woman's family continued to assist in the mission to find her. A group of divers called Adventure with Purpose also joined the search to help determine if Kiely's SUV had become submerged. With the help of sonar boats, they finally found the vehicle in a reservoir roughly 35 miles, 56 kilometers from the Nevada border, with human remains inside. This discovery ended the weeks-long search for the teen, but led to a heartbreaking conclusion. The remains have yet to be officially identified, but Nevada County Sheriff Shannon Moon told reporters that they believe they found Kiely's body. While the circumstances surrounding her death are unclear, it seems more likely that the young woman passed away in an unfortunate tragedy rather than at the hands of an abductor. Number 6. Alex Baranyi and David Anderson. Best buddies Alex Baranyi and David Anderson were both 17-year-old high school dropouts living in Bellevue, Washington. Both teens had no clear idea of what they wanted to do with their lives. They spent their days hanging out at a local bowling alley and indulging in fantasy-themed video games. One day in January 1997, they decided to add some sick excitement to their life by killing their friend. For reasons only they can explain, the pair lured 20-year-old Kim Wilson to a local park and strangled her to death with a cord. Worried that the victim's family might know that she was with them and might pass the information along to police, Baranyi and Anderson then proceeded to the Williams household and killed Kim's parents and sister. 2 children found Kim's body the next day, concealed by shrubs in a local park. Detectives went to her family's home to inform them of the tragedy, and when they arrived, they discovered that the door was unlocked. What they encountered next was nothing short of horrifying. Both of Kim's parents appeared to have been stabbed and bludgeoned to death, and her sister had sustained numerous injuries trying to fend off her attacker, as she was also stabbed. An examination of Kim's friend group led detectives to Baranyi and Anderson, who claimed that they were playing video games together the night of the murders. Their story quickly fell apart as witnesses told police otherwise, and mounting evidence placed the teens at the scene of the crime. Both young men were sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. Anderson challenged his sentence after a state ruling determined that juveniles facing life terms have the right to have their case reviewed. Earlier this year, he was re-sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 33 years. Number 5. Rachel Wade. A Florida teen named Rachel Wade was still seeing her ex-boyfriend, Joshua Camacho, when he began dating 18-year-old Sari Ludeman in 2009. The 2 women found out about each other, sparking a heated months-long rivalry between them that involved vile text messages, online harassment, threatening phone calls, and even public confrontations. Tensions reached a breaking point, and Ludeman decided to confront Wade face-to-face one night. She drove to a mutual friend's home in Pinellas Park, where Wade was waiting for her, and things immediately became violent. Wade stabbed Ludeman in the shoulder and then in the chest, puncturing her heart. As she was bleeding out, Ludeman managed to call Camacho, who then went to his girlfriend's father's house and told him what happened. The 2 men rushed to the scene, and police arrived shortly thereafter. In the meantime, Ludeman was taken to the hospital, where she passed away later from her injuries. Police charged Wade with the girl's murder. She argued in court that Ludeman had charged at her with fists flying and that she acted in self-defense. However, witnesses told a much different story, claiming that Wade attacked Ludeman before she even had a chance to exit her vehicle. When she was finished stabbing her victim, she allegedly tossed a knife into a neighbor's yard and calmly walked away. Wade was convicted of second-degree murder and received a 27-year prison sentence in September 2010. In an interview with ABC News in 2011, she claimed that social media played a major role in the rivalry and leading up to the murder. Number 4. Austin Bromley and Seth Doris. During the late-night hours of November 7, 2009, 28-year-old Jonathan Bird noticed a truck speeding past his home in Wiley, Texas, and yelled at the driver to slow down. The man behind the wheel, 18-year-old Travis Harmon, got out of the truck and threatened Bird before speeding off. He returned a second time with his friend, 16-year-old Seth Doris, and the pair argued with Bird before once again driving away. Harmon and Doris came back to the scene with 3 more young men who proceeded to attack Bird. Sadly, they beat him to death. A medical examiner concluded that Bird died from severe head and neck injuries that left deep bruising on his brain, a torn brainstem, and bleeding in his skull. Police charged all 5 teens for their alleged roles in the brutal assault. 16-year-old Austin Bromley was accused of striking Bird in the head with a hammer. He pleaded with the judge for leniency, claiming he had turned his life around. However, in the end, he was convicted of murder and received a 24-year sentence, along with a $10,000 fine. Seth Doris was convicted of manslaughter and consequently sentenced to 20 years in prison. His brother Ethan received a 15-year sentence for the same charges. Harmon pleaded guilty to manslaughter and received a 6-month sentence, followed by 10 years of probation. Another teen who was present during the fatal beating was sentenced to probation as well. Number 3. Marilee Gardner. In late June of 2016, 16-year-old Marilee Gardner took her parents' SUV in the middle of the night to meet up with a friend in Weber County, Utah. She was speeding about 100 miles per hour, 161 kilometers per hour, in a 45 mile per hour, 72 kilometer per hour zone when she slammed into a Hyundai Sonata with 2 people inside. Unfortunately, the driver, 20-year-old Madison Hahn, died at the scene. 19-year-old Tyler Christensen was rushed to the hospital, where he died from his injuries. Gardner initially tried to flee the scene by driving off into a field, but only made it a few yards before the vehicle came to a stop. She told police that she and her friend had planned to take drugs together and deliberately crashed the SUV as part of a suicide pact, and that she hit the Hyundai on purpose. The troubled young woman faced a slew of charges, including 2 counts of murder, failing to stop at the command of police, and failing to remain at the scene of a fatal accident. Prosecutors initially tried Gardner as an adult, but she ultimately took a plea deal. As long as she pleaded guilty to 2 counts of attempted murder, the murder charges would be dropped. She was convicted as a minor for one of the attempted murder charges and was sentenced to 4 years in a juvenile facility. Gardner was convicted as an adult for the other count of attempted murder, and the judge ordered for her to be transferred to an adult prison at age 21 in order to serve the rest of her time. The charge carries a sentence of 3 years to life, and it's unclear how long she'll remain behind bars. At her sentencing, the young woman wept and expressed deep remorse for her actions. By then, the victim's loved ones already felt let down by the justice system for its leniency toward Gardner, and they were unwilling to forgive her. Number 2. Sarah Kolb and Hadley Quinn. Adrienne Reynolds was 16 years old when she moved from Texas to Illinois to live with her father and stepmother in 2005. Hoping to eventually join the Marines, she enrolled in GED classes to complete her education. There she met 16-year-old Sarah Kolb and 17-year-old Corey Gregory, who now identifies as female and goes by Hadley Quinn. Sarah and Hadley had dated each other in the past, but were just friends at the time. Sarah became jealous of Adrienne, whom she felt was stealing her friends and who had shown a romantic interest in Hadley. She invited Adrienne to join her, Hadley, and another student, Sean McKittrick, for lunch one afternoon at Taco Bell. The unsuspecting teen went along, but things reportedly went sour as soon as the group arrived. Adrienne and Sarah began fighting in the parking lot as soon as they got out of the vehicle. McKittrick allegedly tried to break up the altercation, asking them to stop. Sarah coldly responded by telling McKittrick to leave if he didn't like what was going on, and so he fled the scene. Hadley then held Adrienne down on the asphalt, while Sarah strangled her to death with a belt. The murderous pair drove to Sarah's grandparents' farm and attempted to burn the victim's body. When that didn't work, they called up a friend who came by with a hacksaw and helped them dismember Adrienne's remains. They put her head and arms into a garbage bag, stopped at McDonald's for lunch, and then disposed of the bag at the Black Hawk State Historic Site. When Adrienne failed to show up at her job, her parents called the police and reported her missing. An investigation led detectives to Hadley Quinn, who ultimately ended up taking them to Adrienne's remains. Both teens were charged with murder. Hadley, who was still a minor when she received a 45-year sentence, was granted a new trial in 2019. An Illinois Supreme Court determined that sentencing a juvenile to 40 years constitutes a de facto life sentence and is therefore unconstitutional. Now 34 years old, she pleaded for leniency at her resentencing earlier this year. Her lawyer argued that as a teen, her brain wasn't fully developed and that she lacked the decision-making capacity of an adult. The judge showed no mercy and resentenced her to 45 years behind bars. Sarah was convicted of murder and concealment of a homicide and was sentenced to 53 years in prison. Like Harley, she was a minor when the punishment was handed down and hopes to see freedom sooner. She's in the process of appealing her case on the same basis and is seeking clemency. However, it's hard to come back from something so awful and live a normal life. Number 1. Maeling Smith. In May of 2021, Officer Nathan Jones was on patrol one morning in Evansville, Indiana, when a young man flagged him down and asked him for a ride. He had apparently been involved in a domestic dispute, and he wanted to leave the area before the woman he had been fighting with returned. Unfortunately, this is exactly what happened during the conversation. Suddenly, 18-year-old Maeling Smith rolled up in her car and began yelling at the man. She allegedly ignored Jones when he told her to stay in her vehicle. In an attempt to de-escalate the situation, he tried to handcuff the young woman, but she evaded him and got back into her car. Smith was later accused of trying to flee while the officer grasped her arm, causing him to get stuck as she attempted to drive away. The vehicle dragged Jones for roughly a block before he managed to free himself, at which point the car ran over his arm. Luckily, he managed to apprehend and arrest Jones before going to the hospital. The police department didn't specify the severity of his injuries. Smith was later charged with battery against a public safety officer and resisting law enforcement. She reportedly reached a plea agreement, but the details haven't been disclosed to the public. Thanks for watching. Would you rather live next door to a convicted killer who was given a second chance at freedom, or a loud young couple who constantly argue but don't have a criminal background? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you next time. Bye.